They're usually thought of as being great for the kids, but there are some seriously disturbing moments in these G-rated movies. Get ready to revisit some of your favorite childhood nightmares. If you haven't seen We're Back, A Dinosaur Story, there's a good chance you won't believe us when we describe the plot. If you have seen it, you'll be relieved to know that it's a movie that actually does exist and isn't just some fever dream that you had back in the 90s. Here's the plot. After kidnapping a bunch of dinosaurs from prehistoric times, a space weirdo named Captain New Eyes gives them Brain Grain, a cereal that makes them smart and friendly, and in the case of a T-Rex named Rex, gives him the melodic singing voice of John Goodman. He does this so that he can give modern-day kids the chance to meet real dinosaurs. Unfortunately, he has a twin brother named Professor Screw Eyes, because one of his eyes is a literal screw that's been driven into his face that he uses to hypnotize people in dinosaurs. Screw Eyes wants to steal the dinosaurs, revert them back to Jurassic savagery, and put them in a circus so he can scare his customers. This will somehow make money. There's some other stuff going on too, but for a movie about singing, dancing dinosaurs, it's kind of surprising that we spend about a half hour in a circus that's explicitly designed to be horrific. A lot of these movies get disturbing by accident. We're Back does it all on purpose. Even at its most basic, The Adventures of Mark Twain is a weird one. The plot finds Tom Sawyer, Huck Finn, and Becky Thatcher hitching a ride on their literary creator's airship as he attempts to keep an appointment in space with Halley's Comet. Even keeping in mind that the appointment is Twain's own death, it sounds like it could be a pretty fun romp full of jumping frogs, river hooligans, and wry commentary. It is not. It is terrifying.
What's your name? Satan. Uh-oh. What's the matter?
In addition to Huck Finn and Tom Sawyer, this movie decided to draw inspiration from one of Twain's later works, The Mysterious Stranger. This unfinished novel is the story of 3 teenage boys who meet Satan on the road, and apparently that wasn't creepy enough for this claymation nightmare, which ramps it up to full-on horror movie. In the original fragments, the story did not take place in a pocket dimension, and Satan wasn't a headless nightmare monster with a twisting drama mask for a face. That stuff is all exclusive to the G-rated film version, just for the kids. Originally released as a short film in 1968, Winnie the Pooh and the Blustery Day would go on to win the Academy Award for Animated Short Film and would return to theaters almost a decade later as part of the Many Adventures of Winnie the Pooh. Both times it got a G rating, which makes sense since it's a charming story of stuffed animals having some gentle fun. Except for that one part where Pooh is racked with nightmares and terrible visions of horrifying creatures emerging from the shadows to mutilate and destroy their own bodies in an attempt to steal the only thing in the world that he actually loves. Oh bother. In all honesty, the Heffalumps and Woozles song isn't actually scary, and even disturbing feels a little off. It does, however, follow the extremely weird logic of a dream where elephants, or as Pooh says, Heffalumps, drink honey through their noses until they explode, and where dancing creatures get furious with the viewers for watching them before they casually go back to having their twisted fun. Frightening? Maybe, maybe not, but it's definitely the kind of dream that leaves you feeling uneasy for the rest of the day. Winsor McCay's Little Nemo in Slumberland comic strip is often regarded as one of the earliest high points of the medium and served as the inspiration for everything from a full-length opera to a weird NES game. Oh, and also a G-rated anime film from 1989 that opens with every major nightmare you've ever had all happening at once. Little Nemo Adventures in Slumberland kicks off its charming tale with the title character flying on his bed through the shattered towers of a ruined city. If the sight of what looks like bombed-out ruins from a Fallout game weren't bad enough, there's also the added creepiness of a backwards-running clock tower that appears just in time for Nemo to drop out of the sky. The poor kid plunges into the same kind of seemingly endless fall that's synonymous with nightmares. Then, just for a little extra fun, he's chased by a terrifying train that he can't escape, hounded into a vaguely disturbing version of his own house where his mother won't look at him. Later on in the film, a few of Slumberland's residents are attacked by a formless mass of shadows with 1,000 glowing eyes, but honestly, compared to the all-too-familiar night terrors of the opening sequence, Lovecraftian horrors are downright pleasant. If it's been a while since you've seen it, it's worth noting that Chitty Chitty Bang Bang is both way weirder than you'd expect a Mary Poppins-style romp about a flying car to be, and exactly as weird as you'd expect from a children's story written by the creator of James Bond. Seriously, the romantic lead is named Truly Scrumptious. Ian Fleming was many things, but subtle was not one of them. The most bizarre set piece is the trip to the vaguely Eastern European country of Bulgaria, which is somehow even less subtle than poor Miss Scrumptious. This particular sequence takes up the last quarter of the film, and the conflict is mostly based around Bulgaria's counterintuitive decision to literally outlaw children. It's a goofy idea, but it's made incredibly creepy with the introduction of the child catcher, a character created for the film by screenwriter Roald Dahl because why not terrify as many children as possible? This weirdo brings plenty of upsetting imagery along with him, like the entire main cast disguised as dead-eyed toys wobbling on springs, but it eventually involves him quite literally luring children into his van, or the horse-drawn wagon, only to reveal that it is a cage. The weirdest part, though, comes right after his introduction. In addition to telling the toy maker he's going to make earrings out of his eyeballs, he also describes his method for finding children in exactly the same terms that Christoph Waltz's character uses in the opening of Quentin Tarantino's Inglourious Basterds. No, really.
Like cockroaches, they get under the floors, in the cracks in the walls.
Oh, and he's also waving around a giant metal hook the whole time. You know, for dragging children off to a fate worse than death. It's fun. Speaking of Mary Poppins, most of us remember that film for its delightful, charming adventures, like jumping into a chalk drawing or gallivanting on rooftops with a troop of filthy chimney sweeps. What's far less remembered, though, is Mary herself full-on gaslighting the Banks children. After they get back from a day spent tap dancing with penguins and watching Mary win a race on a carousel horse that she brought to life with her boundless magical powers, the Banks children are understandably excited. Mary, however, is all business, telling them to chill out and go to sleep, saying that nothing of the sort happened while they were out that day, and then chiding them for their overactive imaginations. When they plead with her to acknowledge that their experiences, the experience that we, the audience, also saw, she insists that they're lying and says she'll punish them if they continue to speak what they, and we, know is true.
A respectable person like me in a horse race? How dare you suggest such a thing?
But I saw you do it.
This is classic gaslighting. To be fair, though, it's not as bad in the movie as it is in the book. At least here, outright denying the evidence of the children's senses is an isolated incident. In the original, it happens all the time, and is usually accompanied by Mary acting completely disgusted that the children would even suggest that they'd seen something weird, like, say, a grown woman flying through London on her umbrella. Disney's 1996 animated Hunchback of Notre Dame stands out as the weirdest oddball in the Disney Renaissance era that's full of animated classics like The Little Mermaid, mostly because it has what might be the greatest extremes of tonal whiplash ever committed to film. This is a movie where Jason Alexander plays a talking gargoyle who cracks fart jokes.
All right, pour the wine and cut the cheese.
And where the villain's driving motivation is his fear that his uncontrollable lust will result in being damned to an eternity in hell. It's a weird one. It sets the tone right up front, too, in the sweeping musical number that literally kicks things off and gives us the backstory for whatever this thing is supposed to be. This is the origin story, where Frollo chases down Quasimodo's mother and puts the boots to her, causing her to crack her head open on the steps of the Notre Dame Cathedral. He then attempts to drown an infant before being stopped by a priest who bellows at him about how no matter what he does, he cannot hide his sins from the eyes of Notre Dame, represented here by a statue of the Virgin Mary holding baby Jesus. You know, a mother and child like the ones Frollo just straight up kicked to death and then tried to drown? Like that, but with the judgment of the Almighty. The death of a parent isn't exactly a rarity in a Disney film, it's more like a requirement, really, but those deaths are often more abstract. Dropping a brutal killing on the steps of a church into the first 5 minutes of a cartoon for children? That's some next-level stuff. The PG-13 rating wasn't introduced until 1984, when someone at the MPAA saw Indiana Jones and the Temple of Doom and decided that maybe you should be a teenager before you were allowed to see someone get their heart ripped out. As a result, there used to be a lot more movies rated G, even if they had content like, say, apes driving humans off a cliff to their deaths while hunting them for sport. That's right, 1968's Planet of the Apes was approved for general audiences. Looking back, that's not terribly surprising, what with all the corny costumes and scenery-chewing acting, until that is, you remember that the movie ends with someone shouting in absolute horror at the revelation of complete nuclear annihilation of the human race.
You blew it up! Oh, damn you all to hell!
You, don't want to throw some parental guidance on that one? Not even when someone is having a nervous breakdown about the endless horrors of apocalyptic warfare? No? Okay, MPAA. Your call, not ours. The fact that Anastasia exists at all is pretty surprising. You have to admit that it's pretty weird that there's a kid-friendly animated musical comedy with a funny talking animal sidekick that starts with the brutal execution of Tsar Nicholas II and his family during the Russian Revolution. And don't forget that the heroes are running an elaborate con and the villain is the 20th century's most sinister mystical figure. That is a premise that had to be approved by so many people before it was made, and every one of them signed off. The actual execution of the Tsar and his family is only vaguely hinted at by the presence of a genuine torches and pitchforks mob assaulting the Winter Palace while singing a jaunty tune. Instead, the movie builds to a straight-up insane climax in which we get to see a man dragged to hell to face eternal torment. Early on, the movie shows us Rasputin selling his soul to the devil in exchange for mystical powers, and at the end of the movie, the bill comes due. When Anastasia stomps on Rasputin's amulet, the source of his hellborn power, it shatters, leading to a quick but horrifying sequence where his flesh liquefies and melts from his bones, leaving behind a glowing green skeleton that crumbles to dust. Watch closely, and you can even see his eyeballs falling out. Sleep tight, kids! Check out one of our newest videos right here, plus even more grunge videos about your favorite movies are coming soon. Subscribe to our YouTube channel and hit the bell so you don't miss a single one.